Welcome to another episode of Selling What's Possible, the podcast that's focused on enterprise accounts. Joining me today is Michael Phelan. The theme of our session is going to be about how new research, new AI-enabled research approaches are really shifting and changing enterprise account strategies.
Thanks, Dave, and thanks for having me on. I founded Go-to-Market Pros in Boston about 14 years ago, and my background I started in consumer at companies like Reebok, and then went to B2B at companies like Staples. Then did a lot of work with emerging growth companies, SaaS companies, trying to grow from 10 to 20 to 50 to 100 million. And my background covers both sales and marketing and GTM. But I saw so many gaps as marketing became fractionalized, as sales became specialized, as GTM became specialized, that there really wasn't a very good understanding of the customer and the prospect and what they really want. So I'll give you one example of that. You know, how much money has been spent on personalization over the years, way back when to the first one, we could say your first name was a big deal many years ago. And now we've got tremendous knowledge of the person we're selling to. But I do a lot of interviews with buyers, hundreds of B2B buyers every year. And when I ask them about how important the personalization is, they say not that important. I mean, they don't care how much a seller knows about them. They do, in fact, care a lot about what you know about their best-in-class competitor or their best-in-class peer and performance gaps. So I think we spend a lot of time telling buyers what they already know, and we should spend all our time telling them what they don't know. So that's a big change I think needs to happen. So if you're going to try and help a company improve their B2B sales forecasting or any process, you kind of say, well, what is the job to be done? What are the inputs? What is the process? And anywhere along the line, you can find inefficiencies. And a lot of times companies haven't really mapped that out. So one of the great things to do is to actually map that out for the customer and then have a discussion about, well, let's talk about the inputs. Where are they coming from? What kind of process are you using? Have you considered other processes? What's the output? Is the CFO confident when they go to the board of directors that this number will hold? What are people saying about it? And so you can really become an expert instead of saying we're selling to pain or we're selling to need. And then when you can apply that and say, you know what, when we compare your process to your competitors or best in class processors, we notice they do things very differently. Here's what they do. They're using less input. They have a more efficient process. They have a better output. What do you think about that comparison? And it's very compelling. It drives a lot of discussion and engagement. And ultimately, if they trust you doing that with them, for them, then they'll say, well, how can you help us? Now, keep in mind, at no stage have I mentioned what the company sells. At no stage I've mentioned a product pitch. I'm only waiting for the customer to invite me in to say, how can you help me bridge that gap? So that's what Jobs to Be Done and Bridging Performance Gaps is about.
Okay, that's great. Yeah, we think about identifying these needs, these sort of unmet needs early, emerging, needs that arise, up before the really, customers start funding initiatives to solve that need. And it's in that sort of magic area where, something's happened, they have to do something about it, but they haven't really started down the path that a lot of sellers, we certainly, um, promote this approach, but get in early during that intense signal phase where things are starting to be put together, and this gap that you're talking about, there's a need to move from a current state to a future state of some kind, either introduce something new or solve a problem or address an issue or absorb an acquisition or react to legislative changes or whatever that particular need is. But I think you're getting at the next layer down, which is, okay, once that's identified, that need, what is the job to be done associated with, moving from point A to point B, and what is the current state, and is there a set of inefficiencies or obstacles that stand in the way? Is that a fair
Yeah,
sort of way
totally.
to
So,
frame that?
so we need to drill it down, and we need to identify and define very carefully what that job to be done is. Let's define it. Let's define and visualize that process. And then come back and say, you know what, we have a fundamentally bad process and we have issues with the process and we're going to dramatically improve it. Well, how are you going to improve it? And this is where really success hits. I'm going to improve it because we've studied. So if I'm, Target and, and I've studied Sephora, and Sephora is a best in class company, is actually better than me in some respects. We've studied what Sephora does. Here's the comparison. Here's the gap. When you go up to the board and they know Sephora, for example, is the best retailer in advanced marketing personalization in the world, and we know that Target is ranked number 14, when Target comes where we're going to bridge the gap to Sephora, that is going to get approved. And that is going to get supported. So when you have this approach, it actually not only sells in well, but actually maintains into the company and tends to get supported and funded because it's a strategic goal. It's something when that person in Target walks into the board meeting, invariably the board are going to say, why is Sephora so much better than us in advanced marketing personalization? And if you're that person, you better have an answer. What question are you going to get from your C-suite or your board of directors that you have to answer, such as why is Sephora better? And when you engage customers based on those kinds of questions and issues, they will engage at you every single time. Not only that, they're incredibly lack of knowledge of what their competitors are doing. I remember when I was at Staples, we interviewed the CMO of Office Max, and the HR said, "Well, who would like to interview the CMO of Office Max?" 49 people wanted to interview him, and vast majority of them not really involved in the process. But HR stepped in and says, "Whoa, whoa, whoa! You guys are just trying to get competitive intelligence." And we said, "Yes, that's exactly what we're trying to do." And they said, "Well, you can't use the hiring process to do that, and we can't ask this guy to do 50 interviews." But the point is, inside the company, they were so desperate to figure out what's going on. They had such a lack of knowledge, and I think that's where competitive intelligence and intent signaling is so important. Is bringing the best in class and competitor side of the story to the table.
Yeah, that's great. I think, it's really re-emphasizing the value and the point of understanding your customers' needs is part of the equation, but the other is bringing them insights that are valuable in the context and the moment of that particular need situation that's compelling. And if you have something unique, something thoughtful, we see this play out over and over again with the best performing account teams. They tend to, not only understand the customer well, but they're looking to bring their customer insights and information and knowledge. And I think what the recommendations here are is expand that knowledge set to include this competitive, view and what other people are doing in the industry, and try to help your customer benchmark where they are against those people in some of these areas, because it's going to help get the engagement started, but also can you fundamentally help them fill that gap, achieve that end state goal that they have. But it's all within the context of some competitive, already done scenario or situation that motivates them to take action now. And I think that's what a lot of account sellers struggle with is there's lots of things to work with customers on, but how do you find the ones that are, you know,
Yeah.
will
Yeah,
drive
there's
engagement
there's
today?
um yeah, there's also a lot that can be done within a land and expand framework as well. As I've worked with large companies like AT&T and T and General Motors and all these companies, you'd think that General Motors and AT&T is on top of. For example, we were doing a whole program where it was around building the next generation of car buyers. So teenagers, young adults, college kids, how were they selecting cars? And at the time, a lot of them were going with, Hyundai and Honda and so forth and so on. And so we were helping them really understand that. And what amazed me was how little they knew about that demographic, which was the future of their company. And as you went across different organizations, you found nearly a total deficit of information and a total lack of understanding about how that buyer chose that car. So what we did is we pulled together, all of the brands, and we'd share research on that demographic, and we'd have all the brands talk about what they've learned. So you become a magnet for internal best practices and sharing. And when you become that magnet, and if that's the magnet of, say, for example, if you look at advanced marketing personalization and you have these huge consortiums of retailers, right, in a consortium, and you pull them all together, like let's say we had a symposium on advanced marketing personalization, we pull in the best practices in the world, we pull in everybody that's doing a great job of that. And if you're the company that can pull that together, you are really valuable. And not only that, but you'll get invited to strategic planning, and that will give you a huge opportunity for upsell, cross sell, and so forth. And keep in mind, I've not mentioned what I'm selling. I've mentioned
Right.
the job to be done and the best practices. So there's a lot of internal knowledge that can be done. And what companies typically do is they spend so much time thinking about their one use case, and they're trying to promote their one use case. But don't be so narrow. Think about if there's 27 people within that company doing B2B sales forecasting, bring all 27 together, have them all share. Don't over promote your one use case, but share it. Because what happens is they look at your one use case as too narrow or too specific, or that division doesn't look like me, and so forth and so on. So a lot of this kind of cross selling on use cases fails because you don't have any broader reason to engage.
I agree with you completely. Oftentimes, companies start to promote one way of solving something, right? Everything's a nail when you have a hammer. But if people can just provide some flexibility and break down the customer's different scenarios and needs, it's amazing what companies can do when they're have an adaptive mindset, I would say. And this is where management and marketing and other supporting parts of the organization can help the account sellers sort of expand different flavors of the use case or come up with some different varieties that can be applied, or partnerships that can fill the gap, but things that actually help, as you say, get the job done, map
Yeah.
back to
And
what
I
needs
would
to
say,
be
I would
done.
say, in terms of getting the job done too, a lot of times companies think they're doing a better job than they are, or they have no idea if they're doing a good job or not. So one of the things that I've done is packaged up all of these different ways of approaching land and expand and prospecting. And so I presented that last year at the Demand Gen conference, and it won the award for the best customer marketing workshop. And so what I do is I bring a different view and reality to the table for these executives. So I'll give you an example of that is I was representing a company that was trying to sell to AT&T. It was kind of selling kind of remote tech service system. And AT&T were competing with Comcast. And AT&T had the same product in place for 10 years. And in fact, they had invested in that company. So they were so entrenched. And my client wanted to have an opportunity to meet with them. They had a far superior product developed out in the West Coast, state of the art technology, and they were doing all the work for Comcast. And despite 5 years and a whole bunch of executive reach outs, they had never been able to get a meeting with AT&T. And I said to them, you need to really demonstrate to them why your product is so much better. And so they show me all this stuff, and I'm like, no, no, no. You need to demonstrate it in a way they can relate to. So what we did was we took 5 SMBs, we ran them through the AT&T program, solving a technical problem. We did the same thing for Comcast. We did a side-by-side video comparison of the AT&T experience versus the Comcast experience. Comcast killed them, solved the problem in 41 minutes. AT&T took 14 hours. AT&T was horrendous. The customer got pissed, canceled the subscription, and so forth. We sent it to AT&T. What do you think AT&T said when we sent them that?
Can we meet with you tomorrow?
Well, the first thing they said was, "How dare you make us look bad?"
Oh,
Um,
wow.
And the second thing they said to us, then they sent us all their JD Power Awards. And they said, we have beaten Comcast for the last 10 years. We are far superior to them in every aspect of business, and this proves it.
Really?
And then the third thing they sent us was a letter that if we sign a legal letter, that if we signed it to say we would not publish this or share it with anybody else, they will meet with us. And then when they met with us, they're blown away by how much better it was. But the point is, we're giving them perspective that they can relate to that they haven't seen before. And very seldom do companies do that. So that, the lens can be internally focused, the lens can be externally focused, but the perspective. So things like a before and after. If you're a website development company, there are companies out there that will very quickly, using AI, take the homepage of a website, dramatically improve it in 10 seconds, and they show this is what your website could look like if you worked with us. So that kind of setting a future state, doing a before and after, or an audit. Sometimes companies will go in and they'll do an audit of your operations. One of the things I often do is, you talk to a CIO, and many companies sell to CTOs and CIOs, and you say, well, we want to sell you XYZ system. And the CIO comes back and says, we have a great system in place, a great vendor, everybody loves it, we're never going to change, right? So what I've done in those cases and help my clients do is we actually go in and we talk to 10 software engineers on that CIO's team. And we say, well, we're doing a study on, how well this works and so forth. Give us your feedback. We pay them a stipend, collect all that information. We come back and report it back to the CIO. First off, the CIO will take that call because they really are interested, but they don't know. And when they see how bad it is and how annoyed their team is and how they're going, wow, maybe this is a lot. And then they'll reach out to a couple of those people and say, I'm hearing that people are really not happy with this system. And they'll say, yes, it's terrible. We've been trying to change for years. But you're the one bringing the insight on their customers to the table. You're the one showing before and after. You're the one. And these type of approaches are incredibly powerful and incredibly successful, and yet rarely implemented in today's B2B sales and marketing network.
Yeah, no, I'm a huge fan of all that. I think the bringing insights to the table is relatively well. What you're doing is you're shaping the perspective of the buyer in a way that you're providing new and different insights than what they already know around a particular situation. And if you do that effectively, you're going to not only influence their perspective of you, and you're going to create a sales opportunity, but it's also going to give you more at bats long term because you have the pathway now to keep doing that. And the most successful account sellers I've seen do exactly this. They kind of show up and say, what do you need? What are you looking for? And bring the customer information that's really, not about the product at all, but more about, the situation, the context, what's going on in the market. There's a lot of know-how companies have about what competitors are doing that they haven't packaged or shared. And I think one of the problems is account sellers, and I don't know about you, but often are left on their own to do all this because
Right.
marketing's not there helping them. Management's not there helping them. There's a subject matter expert shortage all over the place. And so it's almost like you just have to figure it all out on your own. And that's one of the things that, we're trying to help account teams do is sort of get their hands on these insights and convert those with AI into valuable outputs they can just bring to customers. But I would encourage our account sellers, don't be afraid to bring insights to customers of any kind, because all insights are good, and they will tell you, well, I'm not interested in that, but I'm interested in this. But it's sort of it gets you down a path of really changing the game, I would say, using insights to change the game and become relevant to the buyer in a way that's incredibly powerful, as you say. And that's what works,
Yeah,
particularly
so
today.
bridging performance gaps is one. I would say leaving money on the table is another. Very compelling if you're overspending for a mediocre product. So how do you demonstrate to them that, you're spending $75,000 more a year for something you could be getting for half the price, right? So this kind of are overpaying for something that's mediocre. So in this climate where companies are they want to keep their customers. They're concerned about financial. They want to reduce their budget. If a CFO sees that we're spending twice what we should be spending and they can get the same results for half, that might be more compelling than buying a best-in-class product and swapping out your existing, right? So you maybe save 5 or 10%, you get a better product. So a lot of times people are selling to the buy the best-in-class, top of the, type of thing. And maybe in this climate, we should be saying, stop leaving money on the table. You can pull, one of the things at Staples, this is another one of the programs we did was we would figure out how many employees a company had. If they're using Office Max, we'd figure out how much they could save switching over on an annual basis to Staples. And we would send a check. It's a fake check, but it looked like a real check to the CFO and say, you will save $275,000 if you switch to Staples in January. And we would nearly always get the call. Now, our finance department hated the fact that sales and marketing were sending out checks, but they really weren't. They weren't real checks, and we demonstrated that. But the point is that leaving money on the table is very powerful to a CFO. There's also a lot of technology debt that's out there too. So if you're able to say, hey, bring my system in and you can dump these other 5 systems and save yourself $2 million. Companies will do that even if your product wasn't as good as all 5 of them now. So there are ways that you could actually sell a B plus product right now that would replace 4 A plus products and do the job 95% of the way there. I think the CFO would say, you know what, we don't need all these bells and whistles. In many cases, companies are not using all the bells and whistles anyway. So think about the climate you're selling into, think about the buyer, and visualize the savings, visualize the performance gap, visualize everything in the eyes of either the buyer, the buyer's customer, or the buyer's competitor, and you'll be much more successful.
That's terrific. Well, as we wrap things up, Michael, these are great sort of how to change the game with insights. I often think, it's that creative, innovative sort of mindset, this growth mindset I always talk about, for account sellers. You got to think of yourself as an innovator for your customers, your accounts. You're not just fulfilling some kind of service, role, but you're really driving innovative, growth opportunities for your company and your client. And if you put yourself in that sort of context and think of yourself as a guide, driving and bringing these insights, you can really put yourself in a great position to drive growth. What would be some of your final comments just to our account team, account executives that are certainly landing and expanding all the time? Big accounts in just 2025. There's a lot of great sort of recommendations you have here. How would you just sort of wrap up any final thoughts of recommendation?
Yeah, thanks, Dave. So one of the things is my workshop is a great way. We bring in account management, we bring in customer success. Sometimes we bring in net new prospecting. We get in a room, we kind of map out 30 different programs. We pick 3 or 4 and we action them immediately for the next day. Some of them, the reps can just take and run with them. So don't be afraid to bring in outside help. I think account management, they're like, well, we don't have budget, and sales enablement, and they don't have budget, and so forth and so on. Yes, you do, because if you map out the opportunity within the accounts and say, we're going to spend a small amount of money to get there. So that's the first thing. Second thing is AI is not creative. And keep that in mind. It will do some tasks, but it's not creative. It doesn't bring in best practices. It won't do anything innovative for you. And the second thing is we have to realize that as technologies come into marketing and as technologies come into sales, we become very good at operational stuff of making the trains run on time. But also people who make the trains run on time are also the least creative people. So as we pushed agencies out, as we push consultancy out, as we've raised up technology, we have a huge void for innovative thinking on sales and marketing. So bring that in and bring that in from the outside. You'll get much more results and much more creative ideas if you bring in best practices and creative thinking. And don't think that AI will replace that. And don't think that it's not fair for your existing team to be expected to know best practices on everything. Be willing to bring people in. And for senior management, you got to make change. In 2025, discovery meetings are down 30%. You got to make change. If you're not engaging with enough customers or prospects, you're not going to drive your pipeline. So focus on one metric. It's all about our customers and prospects sharing information with us. Are they in active dialogue with us about getting the job done, about solving business problems, about growing the business, about bridging competitive gaps? If you're not in an active dialogue, nothing is happening. So marketing download leads, forget about website visits, forget about email opens, forget about. If there's no sharing of information, there's no real value exchange. So I think we need to direct our sales and marketing people on different metrics given what's happening in 2025.
That's a great point on metrics too. It's like, what are you measuring? And a lot of the measurements are very transactional, and they're not about level of engagement and the
Yeah.
different stages of engagement and evidence that the customer's engaged and is, eagerly, working with your teams to figure out how to solve a problem or address something. And you can tell right away when that's happening, but you have to be able to see, as you said, the engagement playing out and evidence of that. But that's all measurable. It's just not traditionally looked at. I think that there's a fundamental gap there, and management needs to spend time looking at it and getting these sellers, more informed, more insights, more things that help them engage, as you point out. So
Excellent.
thanks so much, Michael, for spending time with us. And I'm sure we'll be back with some other great ideas together in a future podcast.
Thanks a lot, Dave.